Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cinderella CEO on Air, our podcast that's been around now for about 5 years, believe it or not. We've been around so long now that we're 5 years old. We've kind of shortened our brand or our brand really to C to CEO. But our basis for doing the podcast is it's based on a book called From Cinderella to CEO that I wrote when I was working in the hospitality industry, which is how I met our guest, who you'll meet in a minute, Mandee Heller. And Mandee Heller, Adler, excuse me, I knew her as Mandee Heller. And what we do at Cinderella to CEO or C to CEO, you can find us at cinderellaceo.com. We offer curriculum, we offer coaching, and we offer a community. And where this idea came from was actually transitioning. We also have a PR and marketing arm, but during the pandemic, we did research with Texas Women's University on the 200 women who were nominated for the Cinderella to CEO Awards, and found out that women in particular, women leaders who had similar traits, similar interest and experience, they also wanted executive coaching, which was kind of a surprise on my end. But they still want to be lifetime learners. They still want to excel, and so the coaching became an offering, and then the curriculum. Since I taught at NYU, and colleagues I know have taught for many years, we decided to offer a curriculum on diversity and inclusion and corporate social responsibility. Those are our two courses that we're offering now. But that said, we save the best guest for the C to CEO on air podcast. And today we have the most fabulous woman who I can't wait for you to meet, because not only is she changing the lives for the better for children and young adults headed to college, but she's helping parents as well. And I'm not a parent, but I am an aunt, and I am invested in my godchildren's education and my nieces and nephews. So I think Mandee Heller, Adler, when I announced, I'm waiting, people are waiting with bated breath now to know more about you. But I think your subject matter and your expertise is of interest to everyone. And of course, teachers who are also joining us on this podcast because they want their students to get into the best schools. So with not further ado, I am going to give you a, a drum roll introduction. How about that? Are you ready, Mandee?
I'm ready.
Okay, all right. Mandee is the author of 3 fast-selling books: To University and Beyond, Launch Your Career in High Gear. Yes, thank you for holding up that lovely book cover. Published by Wiley. From public school to the Ivy League, how to get into a top school without top dollar resources. And Mandee's going to tell her personal story, which is exactly how she got into Ivy League from public schools. And then last but not least, international admissions, how to get accepted to US colleges. Mandee is the founder of International College Counselors. You can go to her website, internationalcollegecounselors.com. She is a certified educational planner, and I'm going to brag on her some more. You know, I told you I knew her before, or I knew her professionally, but before I knew her, she got into the University of Pennsylvania. She was a Benjamin Franklin Scholarship winner. She received 2 degrees there. At Wharton and University of Pennsylvania. She earned her MBA at Harvard University. And then this is when I met her, everybody, is she went to Wall Street, investment banker at Goldman Sachs. And what an incredible success story she was there. She ended up co-founding a company called Her Dollar, which was purchased by Muriel Siebert, and she became part of the Siebert Company as EVP COO of the Women's Financial Network. So here's somebody, if you can see her, or if you look her picture up, you think she would look as old as I do, but she is young and so active in everyone's, um, I think, perception of, wow, she must really, have a, she's ready to retire. I don't think she is. I think she's just getting started. So, Mandee Hiller, welcome to Cinderella CEO on Air. Tell us your Cinderella story.
Thank you. It is really nice to be here. Really, really nice.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
just a shout out to Cary, who I knew, I think about 20 years ago from New
Yeah,
York.
a few minutes ago.
Yes, as part of the Women on Our Way Wyndham Advisory Board, which was super cool. They paid for us to fly to lots of fancy hotels and tell them what women want, which I
And it
remember
worked.
good showers. That was like the big takeaway, was that women wanted good showers.
And
But
still today, we like that.
like good, yes, that was the big takeaway. They flew us to a lot of places to come up with that end decision. It was great. Anyway, yeah, it's really, really nice to be here. So my whole life as my whole career has really involved women and women supporting women, and even in my current role, working with a lot of moms, and also trying to encourage girls to grow up and do great things and go to great colleges and feel good about themselves. And I like the boys, but I definitely, will always have a soft spot
You have
for
a special spot. Yay, which we appreciate that. And how, tell us how, you know, I knew you again, more on the Wall Street side, but how did education become such a passion for you? How did
yeah.
you do, what made you do this?
Well, okay. So my story is I grew up on Miami Beach. My mom, who's on this podcast, was vice president of the Dade County Teachers Union and a very well recognized teacher. And so education was always a big part of my life. I went to a school called Beach High, where, as we discussed, they had a serving team. And I ended up at a school called the University of Pennsylvania, the Wharton School. And actually, when I got to Wharton, one of the biggest surprises, to me at least, was that a lot of the school was, at the time, private school students. There were very few public school students, and getting into a school like Penn from Beach High was actually a really big accomplishment. Whereas there was a private school down the block named Ransom, and getting into Penn was sort of like not so hot. It was like, all right. And I got to Penn, and I was like, what's the deal? Like, why? I mean, my mom's in education. I know education. Why? Where are the public school kids? We're certainly as smart as these other kids. I had no problem in school. What's the deal?
Mhm.
And I met with the superintendent of schools, given my connections. I met with the admissions offices, and I said, why are you not accepting public school kids? And the takeaway from that, like the shower from Wyndham, was basically that the public school kids we didn't have any advising. Like, we didn't know what we were doing. So talking about my own story, I wrote my college application with an erasable pen, because I have very bad handwriting, for anyone who knows me, on loose leaf paper. And obviously it was a good essay, but it would have been great if someone had said, you should type it up, and here, I'll review it. And here, there were just lots of things I could have done differently and better. And so, to make a long story short, recognizing that the gap between the public school kids and the private school kids was college counseling, that's when I started my first book, which was From Public School to Ivy League: How to Get into Top College Without Top Dollar Resources, which was basically like, public school kids, this is what you need to know, and therefore you will have the same opportunities.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, so I didn't do anything with the book. Then that was put down on the shelf. And then
And when you say that you didn't do anything with the book, meaning it was just you wrote it, you were thinking about maybe starting this business.
and on the side, like, I was consistently helping people, from my high school or from wherever,
Hmm.
when they were interested in getting into colleges, but it wasn't my business. I was graduating. I went to Europe, actually. I had a Rotary fellowship, so I moved to Spain, and then I worked at Goldman Sachs.
Yeah,
College counseling wasn't even a thing, or at least I had never heard of it as a
right,
private
right.
profession.
Or if we had a college counselor, and I went to a private school, the college counselor was really not necessarily. I went to girls' school, and we, as girls, were kind of looked at like, there were some people that maybe one or two that, okay, let's see if she could get into Harvard or one of the Ivy League schools, but the rest of us were sort of fending a little bit for ourselves. So it's I love that you mentioned that your mom was involved because of her background in education too. So that was helpful to have parental involvement. I have to go back to Beach High. And so does that school still exist?
Yes, still
I
exists.
mean, so
Awesome.
there must have been a bias, I would think, of like, okay, she went to Beach High. Okay, how
Miami
serious
Beach
can
High.
she
We just
be?
call it Beach High. Yes.
And what was it called?
It's Miami Beach High. So we just,
Okay, okay,
yeah.
got it. Okay.
But it's located in South Beach, Miami Beach. I had it was a great place to grow up. And actually when I speak to my students now, I always say to them, you can be very successful without being a total square. I mean, that's one of
Yeah.
my problems with the kids right now is like, they don't have the balance all the time. So I'd say one of the greatest parts about living in South Florida and growing up in South Florida is that, you can be successful, you can do well, but you can also appreciate nature and get out there and go to South Beach so yeah, it was a really wonderful way to grow up, but it was not the hotbed of academia all the time. So
Right.
we can say that.
Yeah, no. And I think, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and I think, a lot of us are, we're growing up in small towns. We're not in New York City or, now Miami, whatever it looks like. So we're there, everybody's on a learning curve, it seems, even if they are at the pinnacle of they've studied everything to do. What's the number one question you get from I don't know, a worried parent or a worried high school student, like they want to get into a school? What's your I would think you get one question or two that you get most often. What would that be?
I guess most often people ask, what's the one thing I need to do in order to get into this college? Like, is there a secret sauce? Is there something you can tell me that then my children will do? And then like a map, and then they will get in. And unfortunately, there's no map. I mean, there was more of a map, I think, back in the day when the competition wasn't as fierce, right? You could
Mm,
get good grades and good scores, and I think that was sort of the map. And perhaps at the time go to the right schools, right? So the
right.
colleges definitely tilted their hat far more towards certain high schools than others, but now I think they're doing a much better job of taking students from all different types of high schools. I mean, I wrote the international admissions book because we have now that I run the private company, we have students from 13 countries. We have so many students from all over the
Wow.
world who want to come to the US. But they're, taking spots from Americans, so
Yeah.
it's a whole different, the level. So that's the one question they ask. I will tell you the short answer. So I know there's a parent on the phone. The most important thing to get into college is by far the child's grades. That's the deal. So I don't take students who have C averages and help them get into Princeton. Like, that's not how it works. Ultimately, if the child has, I always say that the grades and the scores put the kid in a band, and then my company is really good at, if you're in the band, is sort of getting you into the school, right? Because there are lots of kids in that band. But if you're in this band, we don't like get you into this band because it's your grades and scores that get you into this band or this band. So
Yeah.
and I just used hand signals on a.
I know.
There are different bands, and your grades and scores put you in there, and then we help you get out of the band and into the school. But at the end of the day, it's not about. I think the interesting thing now and over time with being in this business is you have a lot more parents who are involved, and so with that they try to do a lot of the children's extracurricular activities, where I think what was cool about our day is it was really authentic. It might have been haphazard and not structured and not, focused, but it was authentic because we didn't know otherwise.
Yeah.
So now there are a lot of parents who are running huge, nonprofit organizations in the name of their children, or raising thousands of dollars in the name of their children, or writing books in the names of their children.
Wow.
I think that's the least, if the child doesn't have the grades and the test scores, that's just a lovely use of your time, but certainly not going to, tip the scales.
Scale. And what grades do you start working with students?
Yeah. So I I like starting in ninth grade if the parent will let me. That's the best.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't always happen. What we say in the office is the first child usually starts in 11th grade and the second child starts in ninth grade because the parents see the value. But ninth, I think, is great, not to drive the child crazy, right? Because once again, going back to the concept of authenticity and balance and having a fun high school career, but especially if the child is aiming high, right? So if the child wants to go to an MIT or a Caltech or something, what math class you're in ninth grade can make a difference.
Yeah.
Because going back to it's the grades and the classes that matter. So it really stinks when I meet with families in 11th and 12th grade, and in the back of my head, I'm like, wow, I wish you hadn't done that. And I won't say it because that's not nice of me, but
Sure.
at least in ninth grade, I can make sure that the kids are in the right schedules and understand the extracurricular activities and can start to establish a resume and can start studying for standardized tests if appropriate. So that's ideal. But the child has to be ready to,
Yeah.
ready to think about college.
And you have 2 children.
I do.
And they're in high school,
Yep.
correct?
Mhm.
And so you have that empathetic perspective as well, I would think. Is there a philosophy in your company or, something similar that, we don't pressure somebody, especially a child who is not needing to go in that direction, but the parent may want to push them. Is that something you take into consideration?
So, it's, and my husband also works with children. He's a pediatric intensivist, so he's a physician. So we both
Wow.
work with kids, and we both say that we're not necessarily better technically at our jobs, but certainly empathetically now that our kids are getting older and having children and seeing it
Yeah.
has been great. And it's helped me be more empathetic to parents also, understanding the challenges that they face. I think also respecting the differences in children, right? So I have 2 kids and they're really different. So just, respecting kids' differences and trying to help maybe parents understand kids' differences. And even things, and this is going to sound funny. I had a student who really loved math, and the
Yeah.
parent didn't get it. And the parent was like, why
Is he in
doesn't he
the-
play a sport, or isn't it too much? And I'm like, I'm going to be a champion for the kid. He kind of likes math. Like, leave him alone, like
That's a
sometimes
good thing.
it's a good thing, right? But it's sometimes your kids come out and you don't know, you don't understand them. You don't know what's happening, but trying to understand them and meet them where they are and encourage them on their path and their level, because they're all different.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. And I think about that being in, that word authentic that you brought up are there opportunities for a child to show their authenticity? Is that valued in the college admissions process? Do they look for authenticity? That's a
So
hard word for me to say.
yeah, so that's the best, right? So college has gotten so competitive that I think it's really hard to fake it on a really high level, right? So if you're going to say I'm going to apply to Stanford for math,
Yeah.
there has to be a piece of that it has to be pretty authentic, I think.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're gifted enough that you can fake it, but then it just makes high school pretty miserable. So I would say that the first thing we really try to do is find out what the kids' talents are. I don't use the word passion. I think that's like an unfair word and sort of a yucky word for a teenager, but
Mhm.
what their natural aptitudes are and maybe things they enjoy. Because colleges do want all kinds of kids. Like, they want magicians and they want belly dancers and they want kids who speak Chinese and Korean and Hebrew and Arabic, so
That's good.
and then the kids feel good about themselves, right? Because they're like, wow, here's someone who's celebrating my interest in psychology or my interest, and then right, and colleges, and I know Patty, who's on this call, worked for a university. I mean, there were all these majors, right? So if everyone wants to do the same thing, the school can't
Well,
survive, right? So they
yeah.
need to accept the kids who have all these different interests. And sometimes one of the best things I can do is say to parents, like, no, not all the kids have to do STEM to get into college. Like, wow, why don't we celebrate this writer and have this writer enter writing competitions, and she can start a magazine, and she can, or he can write for the newspaper, or win awards in writing. I mean, there's so many things you can do in so many different subjects. And for whatever reason, X subject is celebrated by X school, or this, people think, oh, all my kids need to play sports. I mean, that's a big thing, right? So I thank God I didn't grow up in the time when I had to play, 9,000 hours of sports a day. And I played a lot of sports, but today it's like a whole different level. So, it's you don't need to play a sport for college purposes. You really don't need to be a mediocre athlete. I mean, no college is going to be like, score. I have a kid in Minnesota who's sort of good at track, but that child might have spent, 3 hours a day becoming a mediocre athlete, thinking that that's what colleges want. So just helping to say, wow, do you like track? If you do, great, because I think exercise is good for kids, right? All kids should exercise. But if you really like, poetry, then let's make sure we carve time for you to do your poetry. Because number one, you're going to be better at the poetry. Number two, it's certainly more interesting to a college that you do poetry than mediocre track. And, sort of take it from there. I mean, the kids who excel at track, that's a whole different conversation, the whole recruited athlete thing, but, don't excel.
And you work with kids and their parents to get in Ivy League schools, but do you work with them on all schools in terms of colleges?
So we have 16 counselors, and each of us has a different specialization. So I will say, getting into the different colleges is a different type of process, right? So each of us can work with a range of students, but we do. So if a child wants to play music and go to Juilliard, we actually have someone on our staff who knows music and can do music. I mean, I will tell you, I can't listen to the music and tell you if the kid can get to Juilliard, but I have someone on my staff who can, or tell you what the best resources to improve your viola or your oboe, or I don't know, but we have that, or even art, like looking at a kid's portfolio, like, is this a SCAD portfolio? Is this I don't know, but I have some of my staff who can, or drama or theater, or, so we have specialization. So our company does all kinds of students, learning disabilities. I mean, those are certain types of schools. I've definitely made my name for more of the Ivy League. I mean, I tend to, there are 3,200 colleges in the US. A lot of people don't realize that. So actually getting into college is not that hard. So like everybody can get into college, and it doesn't even have to be that expensive. Like, there are colleges for every kid. But certainly the more, selective ones are harder to get into, and but what's deemed as a great school, it depends on the child, right? The Juilliard kid doesn't want to go to Princeton, right? I mean, that's
right.
Makes sense.
No, that's so interesting. I'm so glad so 3,200 colleges and universities, that's the total?
Right, the whole 4
years. And this is sort of a random question. I've tried to stick to questions that we've talked about I was going to ask you, but I'm just curious. Are there universities and colleges that you work with outside of the United States, that if people want to go to school outside?
Yeah. So historically, I did not. I said to families, we limit ourselves to 3,200 colleges in the US. But one of the impacts of COVID on my business was so many of my American students now are looking at colleges abroad. So that is big. And a lot of my students abroad didn't want to come to the US anymore, or they couldn't come to the US because of COVID. So I couldn't suddenly be like, screw you, too bad, you paid and now you have to come to the US, when they couldn't come to the US. Yes. So we hired a couple of people who have knowledge in internet. So I'm not the expert, so talking about what the cool thing about my business is. But we have people on our staff who know about I'm not saying all the schools, but I would say that, the schools, certainly English language schools abroad. We have people who can help students do that.
That's fantastic. And we, just so you know, we received it in the chat room that Abby Elmudazi, again, mispronouncing your name, I'm sure, Abby, but she said your guidance and support was invaluable during her son's college admission journey. So was there something special about his college admission journey, Mandee, that you remember, or could you describe like what a typical college admission journey should be like in a perfect world, like that's pleasant, and what would that look like for somebody?
So the cool thing, so even with Abby's son, so every kid is different, right? So Abby has 3 boys and they're all different. And I started with him quite late. He actually had worked with someone else and wasn't very happy and came to me after. And so that was a different process. But our process is as I said, like we get lots of intake, so sitting with the kids and finding out about them and going back to, what do you like? What do you not like? What are your grades? What are your aspirations? And then we come up with a plan, which I know sounds a little intimidating sometimes for the kids, but I say the plan can be changed. But if we don't have a plan, then we don't really know where we're going or what milestones we're trying to hit. And so with that plan, every time we meet, we go over the plan and say, here's where we are. How are you going to change? Oh, you like pre-med last month and now you like engineering? Fine. What does that look like? And how do we, but it goes, what I say to the kids is I never want you to look back and say, nobody told me. Right. So, and I kind of feel like that's a little bit how my journey was that I feel fortunate I got into Penn, but I do think it was some luck, right? Because there was a lot of things that nobody told me. And so I would have done some things differently had I known. So at least with these kids, I say, at least the deal, right? At least I'm telling you what you need with a standardized test. You don't necessarily have to do it, but at least what, and it's based on given my finance background, a lot of what I tell the kids is based on numbers and facts. And so, here are all the students. And that's one of the best things about being such a big company is, we've worked with last year, 300 students who got into the University of Maryland. Here were the grades, here are the test scores. When people say college is random, I don't believe that at all. It's not random. Like it's really not random. So it's very numbers based, at least as I talked about getting into the band. And then from there, it's a little bit more fuzzy. And last year was certainly more fuzzy than ever because a lot of the that they usually looked at were taken out of the equation.
Interesting.
Yeah. So last year, I don't know, for those who don't know about college admissions, they, standardized testing, taking away standardized testing really threw college admissions up, into
Did all colleges take out that? Or they had to, I guess.
all except the Florida public ones.
Interesting.
The one holdouts. Yeah.
Wow.
So that allowed the colleges to accept a more diverse student body. And that was a big initiative on their part, was to accept more people of color. And then of course you had the international students who couldn't come into the US because or the international students didn't want to come to the US because they were angry at the US.
Yeah. And then I had a godchild who was in another country going to school, and she had to come home. She had to cut her semester short. It was an exchange program with University of Virginia, but she had to come home, and you lose your money, and that's just what happens. So it was tragic for a lot of families and students, I'm sure. And I guess that'll be the generation that will always be known as the ones that had the hard knocks early, I suppose. Like a well-laid plan is, I guess, can be disrupted, right, in that way. Which brings me to your latest book. Is you've now written a book for kids who are in college.
Right.
So what made you write that book? What do we need to know about that book?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about this book because for years, I guess I've been doing college counseling for 16 years now. And for 16 years, I've been helping kids get into great colleges. And then I found that once they got there, they didn't necessarily take advantage of all the things that the college can offer. And it's hard to know. And it's awesome. They're on their own and they're figuring things out, but just so many cool opportunities. And I say one of, a big miss on my part, for example, was when I was at Harvard Business School, I really didn't keep in touch with any professors. I really didn't get to know any professors. I didn't know there was value in that. I didn't know that was a thing. Now I talk to my friends and they keep in touch with their professors, and I just see it as like a big miss, that would have been so smart to keep in touch with them.
I know.
And so, and not just that, then also in this book has opportunities like, so I had a fellowship to study in Spain through the Rotary Foundation, and that was awesome. And it was free for a year. I'm not exactly sure how I knew about it, but a lot of kids didn't know about it, and there are a lot of other fellowships and scholarships and opportunities, and like your God child
Daughter.
who was studying in studying
Virginia.
abroad. There's so many cool things that kids just don't know about.
Yeah.
It talks about that. It also talks about things that I see in my own office. So going back to a big miss is not befriending professors. How do you communicate with professors, right? I think especially now with the computer and the internet, like kids have no idea. I mean, kids text me at all hours, and it's okay. And part of my job is to sort of educate them. But if you're a professor and you get a text from a kid at whatever, and it says like "hi," it's just not going to lead to a long-term relationship. So educating them on how do you communicate in class, what's important, even like what to wear for an interview, and how to write a cover letter and a resume, and just
Good.
really taking the kids from freshman year through junior year through senior year. These are the things you should think about, and then here are the ways to get you. So I also think of college, which is one good way I think to alleviate some of the stress, is for me, it's not about the name of the college, it's about what you can do with it after, right? So if we think about it like, what kind of job are you going to get, or what kind of, medical school are you going to get into? Then, that might alter what college you go to, right? So if you want to be a veterinarian, for example, you're much better off going to an undergraduate that has a vet school, right? That's a fact. That's clear. So once again, a kid who wants to be a veterinarian is probably better off going to Tufts than Princeton. So you might go to a cocktail party and people aren't as impressed with Tufts. I love Tufts, so I'm not going to little Tufts.
Tufts.
But the point is, Princeton, if you want to be a vet, you have a much better chance from Tufts than Princeton. So
and by the way, Auburn University has a good veterinary school. If
yes,
you didn't know, you knew that, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, there are very few actually graduate vet schools. So once again, going back to thinking of college is how do we get where we want to go? It's not just, applying and then being in a school that has a graduate program, but maybe looking for graduate programs or doing undergraduate research, or and then how do you get that undergraduate research? How do you, going back to communicate with the professors? And so it's really tangible. It's really all the things I wish I knew before I got to college. Like, this is the book I wish I had before I went to college. I'm really excited about it.
I love it. I love the cover. I have a cousin who actually, I have so many relatives, but big Catholic family. But one of my stepbrothers, his daughter is at Georgia State, and she wants to be an astronaut.
Wow.
And so she was accepted to, I want to say, Purdue. But she decided during the pandemic that she wanted to stay closer to home, and they live in Atlanta. Long story short, she's studying to be an astronaut. So, that to me is progress. Maybe she'll get on Jeff Bezos, whatever, rocket one day.
Maybe not, because the woman, he picked her because she wasn't able to get on one of the other rockets. Wasn't that the story, that he picked a woman who couldn't get on because she was a woman? So
I don't know. I've got to read up on that. That's so cool. Well, and I'm not sure where Jeff Bezos' children are going to school, but I hope they call you, because I'm sure they could use all the help they can get.
Yes.
But the people listening to this podcast, and the people who, there's actually a group that is in listening to us live. If I just want to let them know, if they have any questions, to put them in the chat room, because I think we have about 10 minutes left, and we'd love to hear from you. And while we're waiting, I'll ask Mandee another question though. I thought the idea about a plan was really important for kids at the high school level and at the college level. And if somebody has it planned, let's say they're last minute, they're brilliant, but they really don't have a plan, and they really don't know what to do. And they've got, I don't know, let's say 6 months left till they graduate. What could they do? And I sound like I'm describing myself when I was in high school, but that wasn't me, I promise. But I don't know, if somebody's last minute, they're smart, or they're not smart, or they don't think they're smart, but they have an opportunity. Like you said, there are 3,200 colleges. What would you advise them to take a year off? I mean, because some kids are doing that. So
yeah. So I think one of the I think American system, higher education system is the best in the world. So I'm biased.
Good to know.
But I do. And one of the reasons I think it's the best in the world is because they don't force kids to know what they want to do before they enter, right? So if you're applying from Argentina or Russia or Peru, or you at 17 you have to say, I want to be a doctor, I want to be an engineer, I want to be, and then you go to college and you become that. And so then I speak to plenty of parents who are like, yeah, I am an engineer, but I hate it, and now I don't do anything, or whatever.
Right.
So right, to be an engineer, a big time engineer or a doctor, you have to go to graduate school. So I actually think college, certainly ninth grade, freshman year, sophomore year, is a great time for students to try lots of things. So that's in my book, like take all kinds of classes, meet all kinds of people, go to different organizations, check them out. I mean, you really can explore while you're in college the first couple of years.
Okay.
At the third year, you usually have to start picking your major. But first year, second year, I mean, some kids know, but that's very few and far between. I know I'm going to be wrong on the statistic, but it's something like most college kids switch majors 3 times, 4 times. I mean, it's like a high number. So if you go in with that flexibility, I mean, one of the things I always say is, how can a kid say they want to study anthropology? They've never taken an anthropology class, right? Or I want to study linguistics. They've never taken a linguistics class. So it's no surprise that every student who comes to my office, and this is one of the things I explain to them, oh, you're good at science, you want to be a doctor. Okay, that makes sense, because you don't know anything else. Like, you've gone to your pediatrician. Depending where you live, you might not know an engineer. You might know computer science, because you play on your computer, but they don't know the whole world of science that really exists, right? So the beautiful thing about going to college is, maybe they'll work in a lab, or maybe they'll join, the school's robotics program, or maybe they'll check out, a new area of science, neuroscience, or the work in the psychology building. So there's so much you can explore at the colleges, and once again, that's where the book comes in, to sort of say colleges welcome. I mean, it's free, right? You can join all these classes for free. You can do all these things for free. For the most part, the professors are there because they like kids. They want to speak to them and guide them. So,
and that's something that kids might not realize. And I didn't know this until I was a adjunct professor at New York University, is I really wanted to get to know the kids, or otherwise I wouldn't be teaching. So if we can let kids help them understand, that the professors aren't there just to grade you, or the teachers aren't there just to grade you. They really want to be there to help you and to mentor. I mean, 9 times out of 10, I think that's the case. It might not be with don't let one bad apple teacher, I guess, ruin if you had a bad experience. Not everybody is like that. And not every, teacher is a wonderful teacher either. But I love the fact that you're describing a college level exploration, in terms of when you get there, don't feel like you have to be so rigid. You can experience life. And then at the high school level, do you advise kind of the same thing? Like, because I know I was very limited in high school about the world, I think, and maybe that's a lot different today. But is there advice for high school students to do the same?
So there is for 9th grade and 10th grade. So I don't like to play a college game. I mean, but the truth is, if a child is talking about the plan is aiming for an exceptionally competitive college, you do need to excel at something or something. So I do at some point encourage the kids to pick something. But I explain to them, it's not the rest of your life. I don't play this passion game. It has to be something you're passionate about. At some point, it's like, sometimes you think about what your long-term vision is, and you pick something and you do it and you own it for a year and a half, and maybe you keep going or you drop it. But you want to focus on something that utilizes your talents. I mean, I did speech and debate in high school. It was interesting. I'd swum my whole life. I was never very good at it. Hours and hours and hours I would swim, and I would lose all the time. And then I went to my first speech and debate tournament and I won, and I was like, wow, that was easy.
Yeah.
But there are all these other kids who, I guess, they swim, actually my sister, she would swim and she would win everything. And she went to speech and debate and she was like, she lost. So it was just speaking about our natural talents. I don't think I necessarily, wanted to grow up and be an orator, but I was smart enough to know, like, this is good for college, even,
Yes.
it's like, this is, so I could spend all my time swimming, but maybe I'll be a little strategic and instead
Go debate.
go debate and
Right.
do a little bit less swimming.
Well, it's funny because that's a question we have is, do you do public speaking now? Do you go out and speak to groups or in communities or high school level? Is that, are
Yeah,
you?
so we do a lot of speaking. So a big part of our pro bono work is going to high schools and speaking to students and helping them. We do a lot of, but I do a lot of public speaking. It's a great way for me to meet new families and also to give back in some way. So I speak to, I do a lot with the highly gifted families and children. Those parents are very stressed out about college.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I bet.
but all kinds of kids and yes, so we do a lot of public speaking as
Okay, that's good to know because people may want to have, see if you come speak to the college or the high school. And then how interesting, because I was thinking that if you, you were talking about sometimes not being able to relate to your child and their talents. And what if you have a prodigy, and you're thinking, where did this come from? How am I going to get my child everything this child deserves, who's obviously a genius? That must be interesting when you work with people in that situation.
yes, I love those kids. I love
I'm
the high.
sure.
Yeah, and it's not just because they're prodigies. The interesting thing about highly gifted kids is a lot of times that comes with a lot of other baggage.
Yeah.
So once again, loving them for who they are and what they bring to the table and helping them maybe with their deficiencies, right? Because sometimes, not so, a lot of times in the real world, their math genius doesn't translate to success, right? Unless we can kind of help them develop their EQ or help them develop their communication skills. So encouraging kids to be and once again helping them feel good about their strengths, but also working on their maybe the things they have to work on. And then there are these students who are like, I mean, I'll have a real story. I had a student in my office today. I worked with his older brother, and his older brother was what you're defining as a prodigy, right? So he they live in Panama. This kid went to a small Jewish day school that I know isn't such a good school. And after his full 8 to 5 day, he would go do AP classes on his own.
Wow.
Get 5 Us on his AP exams, and he, on top of a full day. And then he ended up getting his MIT. Okay, so that was older brother. Younger brother, not so much, right? So younger brother has learning differences. Younger brother, I don't think cares. I don't think he's taken a single AP class, let alone an honors class.
Very
But
different.
he was really like a cool, interesting, fun kid. He started a business. He sells like electronics. So he was showing me how he sells electronics, and he, buys from here and sells it. So what am I going to be like? Your brother's better than you? No, I mean, this kid's going to be a super successful in his own way. So older brother went to MIT. Younger brother, we're talking about Babson, right? So anyone knows Babson. Babson's a really amazing school for entrepreneurship. Would be the wrong school for older brother. Awesome school for little brother. And right, if we talk about college as a gateway to the future, little brother's probably, can start his business and do his thing. Older brother can go off and do science research or whatever he wants, so
Absolutely.
celebrating each of their gifts, I guess, is where we're going
I
with
love
that.
it. I love your philosophy. If anybody, needed a reference who's listening to this, just to have somebody grow up and be as compassionate and smart as Mandee Heller Adler, you can't go wrong. I just, when I picked up the phone or went on LinkedIn and said, I'm not sure if Mandee will remember me. And of course, you were so sweet, you did. And I'm so thankful you would take the time to be on our podcast. There will be lots of people who will benefit from hearing your comments and listening to you. If they want to get in touch with you for further information, and where can they buy their books? What's your website, and what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, thanks. So my website's internationalcollegecounselors.com, which is the name of my company. You can buy the books under resources. It's awesome. They're also available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all those places. But the website's definitely the easiest.
Okay.
And I welcome your questions. You can also contact me through there. But I'm pretty accessible. As I always say to people, I'm a mom first, so I'm happy to answer mom questions. As long as it's not excessive amounts of time. I welcome hearing about people's kids, and I love kids, and I really, I'm happy I found this. So I know Patty was on this call from my previous days of finance. To be honest, I didn't like it that much. I mean, I could do it. But there were people who woke up in the morning and put on MSNBC, and they were, they really walked and talked finance. They breathed it. And once again, I was good at math. I could do it, but it didn't wake me up at night. I wasn't cutting edge. I was sort of, let me do what I need to do, and I'll go home. This I love. I mean, I'm constantly talking and reading and moving and learning and trying to grow and get better. So
Wow, that's really great information. And who Mandee's referring to is Patty Francie, who is I think the chair of the Muriel Siebert Foundation, connected again, Mandee's previous boss and employer, Muriel Siebert. So Patty is
CFO of Columbia University when I knew her.
a chief financial officer of Columbia University. And so Patty's listening in. Thank you, Patty. Another person who's listening in is Professor Faye Hall Jackson, who's a professor at Tuskegee University. And she asked a quick question before we have to wrap up. And she says, thank you for the tips, great information. And her question is, are personality tests important in selecting passive study?
So I'm not a psychologist. I think some people think so and some people don't. I personally don't use personality tests. I'm not trained in that. What I think is really helpful for teens, and it could just be that's what I know, is internships. So I find that, like, kids will say, I want to be a lawyer. And I'm like, there's a big difference between what you see on television and real life, so, even just letting a kid shadow you, I think is so meaningful. Or I want to be a doctor, what a doctor really does, so what an engineer really, so I think that's a great
that's something to bring out somebody's personality, and then have maybe a reference from that with this kid or this child. Or
so what is the job? So going back to college being a gateway to your future, what is an architect? So if you go into college for architecture, like, what does an architect really do? Once again, I think there's a big disconnect between what kids think an architect does and what an architect actually does. Mm-hmm. So one day in an architecture firm, a lot of times we'll say to the kids, wow, I like this, or I don't like this. But that's where I think parents get angry, is when they spend 4 years and $200,000 on college, and then they don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
That's kind of a waste. So
that happens quite a bit, I think. And, it is one of those things, like I know you probably were great and still are at finance, but if you had, one last question, if you didn't go into finance, I don't think you said you wanted to be a surfer, but obviously you're in counseling now and teacher. When you were a child, did you have something else you thought you might have wanted to be? Just curious. Like, was there something?
My mom's going to laugh. I wanted to wear a fancy suit and carry a briefcase and work on Wall Street. I had a vision. I was going to fly around and go on the plane. And I think it was a vision of the person I wanted to be. That was more. And then I ended up at Goldman Sachs, because I remember there was a boy at Wharton, and he seemed to have all his stuff together, and he was from New York, and he was handsome and smart and everything. And I was like, and where do you want to work? And he said, I want to work at Goldman Sachs. I'm like, okay, me too. But I never heard of it. I didn't know anything about it. And that was kind of the way I made my decision. Going back to the gap year thing, I feel pretty passionately that undergrad, you can kind of explore. Once you get to graduate school, I think the child should take the time to be 100% sure that's what they want to do. So, yes. So I feel I went to graduate school too young. So I didn't take advantage of the career opportunity that I should have, because I didn't know what I was doing. But I didn't know I like business. I like entrepreneurship. Every business is sort of the same. It just depends what you're selling, right? So I was, even at Goldman Sachs, I was an entrepreneur, because once you're a professional, you kind of manage your little fiefdom or whatever. Right. But I just think and I tried working in retail. So talking about a different type of business, which the logic was, if I'm going to sell something, I might as well sell something fun. But I learned I didn't have the design eye to really be successful in retail. So I really believe in what I do. So, to sell it, because we're all just selling,
Yeah.
to do this, I just think is a really wonderful way to spend my life. But it is business. A lot of people are like, oh, you're a college counselor. Yeah, but I run a business. So,
The best of both worlds.
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
You're a wonderful guest. Thank you. And I hope you'll come back again. And we will direct as many people as we feel could benefit from your wonderful knowledge. And I hope you'll keep in touch with us, Mandee. And I love what you're doing. Thank you. Thank you again from Cinderella CEO and the rest of the team behind me, who is inside my computer and throughout the country. We really appreciate you being on today.
Thank you so much. So nice being here. Thank you.
Thanks, Mandee. Thank you.